talk is through the Reformation Well Institute's teachers training, and we will be speaking about oral narration. I also want to take the approach of this being the voice of the trivium in classical education. And I also want to clarify that we are mainly going to focus on oral narration, but there are many forms of non-oral narration that I will mention during this talk. So I would like to start with some thoughts from some great minds. So I'll be reading these quotes. First, we have John Locke. He says, "There can scarce be a greater defect in a gentleman than to not express himself well, either in writing or speaking. But yet, I think I may ask my reader whether he does not know a great many who live upon their estates, and so, with the name, should have the qualities of gentlemen, who cannot so much as tell a story as they should, much less speak clearly and persuasively in any business. This I think not to be so much their fault as the fault of their education." Harsh words for educators. "For the sole true end of education is simply this, to teach men how to learn for themselves, and whatever instruction fails to do this is effort spent in vain." And that is a quote by Dorothy Sayers in her essay slash speech, The Lost Tools of Learning. Charlotte Mason said, "Children must labor, must get ideas out of books. The labor of thought is what his book must induce in the child. He must generalize, classify, infer, judge, visualize, discriminate, labor in one way or another with that capable mind of his." So all of these quotes are calling for something. They're calling for something different in education, something specific in education. So I just want to review the trivium. I know that there have been a lot of people who write about the trivium, who speak about the trivium. I'm going to give my brief thoughts, and I will share more about this at a later time. I'm working on an article that will be shared about my perspective on the trivium, taking everything together and narrating it myself in a written narration, basically. Um, so grammar, um, the ancient view of the trivium was first written down by Cassiodorus, who was a Roman scribe. He served the emperor as well, and in his retirement, he went and formed a monastery that was dedicated to the preservation of Western culture. And he is credited with saving Western civilization after Rome had been overtaken by the barbarians and no one wrote anymore. He wrote, his scribes in his monastery wrote, and he summarized and defined these three parts of the trivium. The medieval scholars used what he wrote, and that's what I'm speaking about now. So grammar is basically the building blocks. These are the three language arts. The trivium means three ways, or in one translation. So these are the three ways that we can gain knowledge and understanding. Grammar is the art of understanding the smaller bits of speech. Typically, it's associated with grammar school, where young children are learning actual grammar. It includes a lot more than actual grammar in our modern understanding. But basically, it is knowing the language you're speaking. How do you speak English? How do you use the words? How do they fit together? How do you put the sentences together to make a thought? Dialectic or logic is less referenced in the ancient literature, but it is the idea of measuring everything against itself, using statements and logical processes to discover the truth of the world. Saying this thing is this and not that, or saying if we do the X and Y, then Z results. These are forms of dialectic and logic. Rhetoric. There are many definitions of rhetoric. In summary, I will say rhetoric is the art of persuasion. It is also a productive art, meaning that the person who practices rhetoric is creating something that can be shared and enjoyed by others. They're producing not a product in our modern understanding of our society where we buy and sell things, but they are actually creating something that you can discernibly appreciate. Um, so they're taking the information that they learned how to understand during their time focusing on grammar as they practice the art of dialectic, and they're putting all of that together to persuade, to create thoughts, to clarify, saying, I have something to share with you. And that is what I am doing today, hopefully. The trivium, um, just to clarify, I don't um, think that we have fully expressed what the trivium is in our modern classical revival, but I will talk about that another time. But I want to mention that they are not, the language arts are not tools, they are arts. And arts, as such, are skills to be practiced. You have to practice your art. They're not tools to be used. And I have a quote here from Philip J. Donnelly, who wrote a book called The Lost Seeds of Learning Grammar, Logic, and Rhetoric as Life-Giving Arts, which I do recommend you read. He says something really important in the book in the beginning. To imagine that a tool can give us an adequate analogy for understanding the arts is like mistaking your hammer for the living knowledge of how to use a hammer. If we imagine that an art is reducible to a tool, then we risk reducing something that is alive, the interpersonal act of knowing, to something that is dead. Because such living knowledge only exists in persons, to reduce any art to a tool also risks reducing persons to tools. And I won't comment on that anymore, but I encourage you to think about that as we approach how we are conceptualizing and planning the way that we are educating children. I'm saying all this because narration is an art and not a tool. It has been seen or referenced as a tool in many writings, but it is an art and it must be practiced. It is a living thing because humans are interacting with it. Um, it is also a long process. I am a physician, a medical doctor, and I can draw a lot of parallels to the practice of medicine. It's a long journey. Medicine is not something that one day you learn, you regurgitate, and then you know. Um, I still practice medicine, even though I've completed all of my training that took many years. Um, when one narrates a text, they're not providing a summary. This is not the same thing as, for example, an AI summary that you might find on a search engine. Um, this is a telling back. And when the learner tells it back, they're able to tell it back while expressing the ideas, the style, the nuances of the text in a way that only persons can. The subjects of narration may be literary text, movies, audio programs, a picture. You can show a picture to someone and ask them to narrate it to you. A scene that you paint with your words. You can have the learners close their eyes and imagine a scene. It can be a visual scene they're viewing. They are looking at a mountain overlook. You can ask them to narrate it to you. A real life event that the child experienced, etc. There are many things that can be narrated. It is not only text. However, Charlotte Mason does describe narration mainly in the context of a text-based education. So historically, as Daniel already said, it was a
You have 30 minutes. So yeah.
hello. Um, so narration was a part of the preliminary exercises. It was part of the progymnasmata in ancient rhetorical and grammatical practice. However, they did not view it the same way that the later educators did during the Renaissance. They applied it to any subject and they made it a core aspect of learning practice. specifically Erasmus and Comenius, are the ones who championed narration and really integrated it into all of classical education. And then Charlotte Mason revived and reapplied this many years later. So I want to give a quote from Mary Carruthers that we'll reference later again. One accomplishment, which seems always to have been greatly admired by both ancient and medieval writers, was the ability to recite a text backwards as well as forwards, or to skip around in it in a systematic way, which without, I'm sorry, that's a typo, without becoming lost or confused. The ability to do this marked the difference between merely being able to imitate something, reproduce it by rote, and really knowing it, being able to recall it in various ways. That is what narration offers our learners and ourselves, not just giving the information back via rote regurgitation, but really knowing it. Charlotte Mason said, and I referenced this in a previous talk, all education is self-education, meaning you cannot force a child to learn something. They do have to digest that themselves. Telling them to memorize something and then regurgitating it back will lead to them losing that, and they will never truly understand it, and they won't keep it within them for the rest of their lives. These are some of the benefits of narration. There are more benefits of narration. It first enables the child to practice the three arts of the trivium or build their underlying skills that you need to have in order to practice the three arts of the trivium, specifically rhetoric. A lot of times narration is considered a pre-rhetoric skill that we practice because rhetoric, as I said, is taking new ideas and or old ideas and putting them together in a new way for the purpose of persuasion or sharing a new perspective. So when you're narrating something that already exists and describing it or telling it back, you're not synthesizing any information. However, it helps you practice and hone your skills that you need in order to do that. However, you can use narration to practice rhetoric. You can say, um, narrate this text, please. And one moment, please. Just give me a moment. You can say, narrate this text, please. And then they narrate it. They learn how the text is presented. And then you can ask them to argue in the same way a new idea. And that would be practicing the skill of rhetoric. Another benefit of narration is it preserves the child's love of learning. They do not get bored of memorizing. They are engaging with the text. They are applying the text to their own lives, trying to understand it. As Eleanor Frost said, who was the writer in the PNEU, Charlotte Mason's parents group, um, she wrote in the Parents Review that effort brings power. And she was referring to narration and how it does take great effort from both learner and teacher, but it does bring power. The child is able to feel that they have power over their mind and their body. They also do have more power because they have achieved the ability to use and understand language better. Um, it strengthens the habit of attention, which is probably the most important habit that Charlotte Mason emphasizes and recommends that we focus on as educators. It increases the child's engagement with the text. It develops oral and written fluency. It sets the foundation for excellent oration and composition. And um, this is only from um, anecdotes, but students who were educated using narration specifically in the classical tradition through the pedagogy of Charlotte Mason have been found to be exceptional orators and writers in college. It's very easy for them to write the papers when they do pursue higher education. It's very easy for them to speak and make arguments because they have been practicing narration basically their entire lower years. So this is a chart that I put in here from a book that I referenced for this talk, and it's at the end of the talk. I have the books referenced. It's called Narration, the Voice of the Trivium. This is just showing how we move along. Now, grammar and dialectic both contribute to rhetoric. So, and grammar contributes to dialectic. So this is just a good summary for us to understand what we are doing when we are practicing narration and focusing on developing these skills. The beautiful part of this is that we don't actually have to break everything apart as it is shown in this chart. All of these things happen as we practice narration. Oral versus non-oral narration. These are two charts. So this is the first chart here is these are some examples of oral narration. So you can do it yourself as a learner. You can narrate to another person and they go back and forth, offering more details. You can style this different ways in the classroom as well. You can do drama where you are acting out and using words to express what happened in the story. You can even sing your narration. Non-oral narrations would be written narrations where you write on a piece of paper what you would have said out loud. This is for the upper grades. I will um, show you a chart later or an outline later. Illustrative narrations, that's like drawing a picture. This is especially good when kids are struggling at the beginning and they're just getting tired of doing narrations so much. They can draw a picture of what happened and then tell you what the picture means. There is silent narration. This is more for high schoolers, where they have a lot of text to move through. So they read the text and then they close their eyes and they narrate to themselves in their head. It helps them process the information, but doesn't take as much time. And it doesn't need the interaction of a teacher. And then there's bullet point narration, which is more like modern educational practices and may err to summary. And I don't recommend this often for younger learners, but it can be very helpful when we're going through very dense texts. I personally use bullet point narration a lot um, as an adult, and it's very helpful to me because I've already developed the other skills, and now I'm just trying to write it out so that I can sort out all of the ideas that I'm encountering. So, beginning narration. Karen Glass says, when it comes to narration, you don't just begin once, you begin and begin and begin. And sometimes you have to begin again. So some children pick it up quickly, but many children resist it initially. It's not natural. It's not something that children want to have to do. They may naturally do it. You can sometimes trick children into not realizing they're narrating and say, what happened in that movie? Can you tell me what happened in that book? Or pretend I cannot see and describe that painting to me in a museum, in an art museum. Those are all ways you can sort of surreptitiously get the child to narrate to you. Um, but really, they need to be able to get to a place where they are willing to narrate, even when they know they're being asked to narrate, and know that it's coming and be able to participate emphatically in that. It's important to start simple with high quality but easy to understand texts. And for young children or even adults, Aesop's Fables is a great way to start. They are available widely online. A great way to start, even in the younger years before they are going to officially be in the classroom setting and doing formal lessons. You can read them an Aesop fable and say, what happened in that story? And have them narrate it back to you. So this is an overview of the narration lesson. So first you have a little talk. I like that these are often called the little talk because it is a little talk. It's short, but it also reminds us as educators that our role is to only talk a little bit. We don't want to be talking a lot. Little talk. This is applicable to a lot of classical education, unless we're using the Socratic method. Um, so first we have a little talk. The teacher briefly introduces the text, gives context, helps orient the students. They might pull out a map or a chart or a graph. They may um, list a few difficult vocabulary words, um, maybe even teach what they mean, and have a short little lesson there. They may ask the children to a few questions that help them remember what happened in the story in a previous chapter or paragraph from the last lesson. This should not be any longer than 5 minutes. Then we move on to the oral reading. It's best if the students, if they can read, have the text in front of them. The teacher reads aloud, or the students can read aloud. They could take turns. Someone is reading aloud, and um, during the reading, it should be read beautifully. It should be read with appreciation. It should not be monotone. Um, it should be read in the spirit of the text. The reader should not stop. The teacher should not stop to define words or provide explanations. Students should not interrupt to ask questions. Um, these should all be well understood guidelines that the students have ahead of time. So when you're starting out, you want to start with very short passages. So for young children, that would be 2 to 3 pages of a picture book. For older children who read chapter books, this is 3 to 4 paragraphs. So it's not very long. It's fine to start short because you're going to gradually lengthen it. And it's good if the student gains confidence before you lengthen it. Um, they are the biggest factor in the success of your narration art that you're guiding the practice. So you want to be very sensitive to how they are progressing with that and not overwhelm them with difficult texts or long texts. And every child is different. Um, so in the classroom setting, I'll talk about that in a moment, but in the classroom setting, really finding the happy medium where all those students can flourish. Next step, the students close their books. The teacher doesn't even need to keep the book open, and they tell back as much as they can remember in a narrative summary. Now, I say summary, it is not a summary like I mentioned, it's not an AI summary, but they are trying to tell back the story. And when they tell it back, it's not going to be as long. So I will say they can tell it back, not intending to summarize, um, but it will be their version of the events. Teachers should not correct their narration. The student may self-correct, say, oh, I can't remember which year it was. Okay, well, oh, 1796. It was 1796 and they left and then the child moves on with their narration. If it's in a classroom setting, other children can contribute. If they not to interrupt their narration, but when one child narrates, another child can narrate after and add in any information or correct information that the first child gave in their narration. And then the last step is a second little talk. Again, little talking. Um, now the students can open their books again and say, oh, that's what I forgot. I knew there was that part I couldn't remember. And they look in there, and then they're going to remember really well. Um, or if they had a question about it, like, oh, that word, yeah, what did that mean? Then they can ask a question to the teacher and say, what does that word mean? The teacher really should not be asking the questions, however. They should not be saying, what is the main point of this passage? What is the theme where you're trying to get one specific idea? You may ask the students in a Socratic form, what do you think the author was trying to say? You can ask that, but there should not be a one right answer that you're going to guide the children to reach. Um, there may be a truth that you're trying to guide them toward, but it's not something that you will give yourself. Um, so older students who are really engaged in the text, they will talk and discuss it. You can cut it short. It doesn't have to continue after that. It's usually not needed, especially in the interest of time. So this can be a very, very brief little talk. So, in a group classroom, obviously, every student cannot narrate every time. You can do many different systems, like the one I already mentioned, where one student narrates followed by another student who fills in the details. The students can split into partners or groups where they narrate to each other, um, but they should always be ready. Don't give them the idea that they will or will not have to narrate. Don't say, Johnny, you will be narrating this today. Please pay attention. Or have then another statement where, don't worry, you won't have to narrate this today. Every student should always be ready, and that increases their motivation to use their power of attention. So, the added benefit in the classroom that we don't have when we are teaching in a one-on-one setting, usually in a homeschool setting, um, is hearing the text again in another's words. So the students, they'll hear details that they might have forgotten or missed and say, oh, yeah, that's right. That did happen. I did forget about that. Oh, and they drew these things together and they're saying, oh, that led to that. And this means that. Oh, now I understand. It can really help other students to hear the narration of their classmates and to see that narration, it can be a struggle for every student, and everyone is dealing with the difficulties they're in. It is quite a taxing effort on the mind. So the primary goals of narration vary by level in education. Um, so I have the grade levels according to the US system. I'm not sure where everyone is listening from, but we have grades 1 through 12. There's kindergarten. Um, However, with Charlotte Mason and what she discussed, as well as some ancient classical educational philosophers, really students aren't ready to start formal lessons until they're about 6 to 7 years old, which is about grade 1 in America. So I'm starting from grade 1. We can have the children interact with many different educating um, materials. We can do lessons with them that are very play-based and casual at younger ages. The main risk here is endangering the child's love of learning. That is another topic that you can read more about. Charlotte Mason really describes it very well and the reasoning behind it. So for grade 1 through 3, this is about up to age 9, the children are developing their oral fluency. So they are doing oral narrations or acting out, which is a type of oral narration. They may do drawings sometimes, but mainly the goal of narration is to develop their oral fluency. Grades 4 through 6, they're going to continue to practice their oral narrations sometimes, but they are going to focus on written narrations because they are developing their written fluency. Grades 7 through 9, this is where you introduce the skill of editing. And this is going to target each individual's needs in your classroom. So some of them may need to continue to build their oral narration skills, continue building writing fluency, and when ready, students this age will begin to tackle composition. And then this, which would be rhetoric, a lot of the time they'll be practicing the art of rhetoric. Grade 9 through, or I'm sorry, 10 through 12, they are going to develop these composition skills, and they will also be enjoying all the benefits of the fluent oral and written narration that they already have. Some encouragement um, from someone who wrote an article, some notes on narration, which I linked here. They said, the true measure of the value of narration can only be gleaned by a teacher who persists with his own pupils. And as the children's powers develop, so will the teacher's pedagogical and psychological insight develop. The teacher must restrain himself when breaking in a class. This is, starting narration. It will be weeks, perhaps months before the majority are fluent. Impatience must never be shewn when the children mumble a few words instead of giving a brilliant narration, and they must never be prompted or interrupted. The following notes may be suggested to beginners. There are many ways of conducting narration. Every good teacher will have his own. So I just found this quote encouraging for each of us. We will have our own ways of leading a narration lesson. It's very individualized. It's very individualized to the educator and to the learner. And it takes time and effort, but it will pay off. This is the best way to have children practice the language arts of the trivium. So, moving on to the lesson plan for narration. What, and as we start any lesson plan, of course, we're thinking of our goals and objectives. What is the goal? Is the goal for the teacher to perfectly prepare a bit of knowledge for the student to memorize, then regurgitate on a test? You would think this is the goal for a lot of modern education, but not in classical education. Or is the goal for students to be trained in the habit of attention, to be guided into the habit of fully attending to a text to understand it? Is it to expect a student to retell the contents of the lessons, highlighting their understanding of the main points and including elements that were meaningful to them as an individual? So this is an example of uh, how we can conceptualize our lesson plan. This is taken from Charlotte Mason, and um, it is a ebook by Jason Barney that I just forgot the name of, but it's at the end of this presentation, and you can download it for free online. Um, so we have, what is the target? What is the language skill objective? So what are we thinking of? Are we thinking of how we need to develop the child's oral fluency? Are we trying to develop written fluency? Um, are we training them to then have a discussion with arguments? Are they going to be making a persuasive argument after this? What sub skills are they going to be practicing? What do we want them to master as a result? Um, then we have the pre-grammar. This is the setup. Um, this is what I already talked about. Um, this is another way to discuss it. Grammar, this is where the teacher reads the text aloud, or the students read silently or have already read it previously at home. And then we have the pre-rhetoric, which is the actual narration where the student narrates. And then we have the second little talk, which can be a dialectic exercise, practicing the art of dialectic. And then we can move it after that to rhetoric, to a response. Um, if that is a part of your lesson, probably in higher grades and older children, older students. But what are they going to gain from this lesson that helps them develop their art of rhetoric? I'm sorry. Okay. So just one idea. I mentioned how the Renaissance Comenius said that this is for all subjects, all arts. So how can we narrate other subjects like mathematics? Sometimes it's just completely um, baffling for teachers to imagine this. So I just wanted to go over a few ways. So do you remember the quote from Mary Carruthers? How in the ancients and the medieval teachers said, if you really have mastery of a text, you can narrate it forward and backward, and you know every bit of it. You can take a piece of it out and you can move things around and still understand it. That is having a true understanding of a subject. Same with mathematics. Have them play with the numbers, manipulate them backwards and forwards, organize them in different ways. Charlotte Mason talks a lot about mental math. You do not need, and I'm sorry, maths. I say math in America. I'm trying to say maths. Um, you do not need a text or you don't need a deck of drill cards. You can drill your children and your students in mental math, which is a foundational skill for them to have to succeed in mathematics. You can say, what is 3 times 4? What is 3 plus 4? Now, How can you move those numbers around? And what happens? Tell me about it. That's one way to get them to do a little mini narration. Oh, well, 4 times 3, that's the same as 3 times 4. So if you take 4 times 3, you'll get the same answer. It's 12. Um, some examples for mathematical concepts. Tell me what you know about blank. What is the relationship between blank and blank? Draw a picture of an idea in mathematics and explain it to your friend. Create your own maths riddle and try to have others solve it and then explain it to us when we don't get it or we do. Um, Please look at your partner's work and explain how she solved the problem. I recently taught sixth grade mathematics um, as a substitute for a period of time, and this is something I employed a lot. It was a very small class, and it was very helpful for the students to look at one another's work and say, oh, I see how they did that. And that is why they got to the right answer. Or they say, oh, I see the error that they did right here. Um, and that is why this answer was incorrect and ultimately led to the wrong answer. These are quotes by Socrates. All arithmetic is a thing that is necessary for everyone to learn among his first studies. He said, all arts mingle with number. Every kind of art and knowledge is compelled to participate in them, which is number. So mathematics is just as important as literature, just as important as language. And we can we can practice the language arts within mathematics. They are all very much interconnected. So in summary, the art of narration is an effortful practice for both the teacher and the student. You have to play the long game as the teacher. And if you win, your student wins. The more you understand the process as the educator, the less you will be worried about days that the narrations don't seem to go well. You say, wow, that was really not great. Of course, you don't say it out loud, but you're just thinking, what am I doing with this student? But you don't need to be discouraged because this is a long process. One off day does not matter. No individual narration is of great importance. Instead, it is a consistent practice of the art of narration that builds these thinking skills and helps students gain the power to clearly express themselves, which we heard from John Locke is essential. We will not be the educators that he critiques. Um, Each narration is a fresh start. It is a blank page, either literally or figuratively, for the child to write a bit of knowledge. And that knowledge that they write, whether they speak it, they draw it, they act it, they write it down, it becomes their own and they keep it within them. Charlotte Mason said education is a science of relations. And part of those relations is the individual's relationship to the subject matter. And the narration is an ideal way to get the child to relate to their subject matter in a meaningful way. So these are 3 books that I highly recommend for further reading. The first is Narration, The Voice of the Trivium by Adrian Freese. Know and Tell, The Art of Narration by Karen Glass, and A Classical Guide to Narration by Jason Barney. They all are within the classical tradition from that perspective. Karen Glass also wrote Consider This, which is the book about classical education, and Charlotte Mason. The book by Karen Glass, the middle book, is most helpful for homeschoolers and parents and their children. There are a lot of examples of narrations, and there are a lot of experiences of individuals that she's relating that you can be encouraged and gain knowledge on how to succeed in your own teaching practice. A classical guide to narration is more focused on a classroom setting. It is not as focused on an individual parent and child homeschool. And narration, the voice of the trivium, kind of includes those elements, does not have real life stories like Know and Tell does. And it's more focused on referencing the ancients and what they thought about these things and modern writers. And then there is a link at the bottom of this slide, the Narration Trivia and Planner, Charlotte Mason and the Classical Liberal Arts. It's a really good book by Jason Barney, who's the author of A Classical Guide to Narration. That's free that you can download at that link. I believe you have to sign up just for an email list to get that. And that can walk you through the basics of what his book tells you um, about how to use narration in your classical lesson. Okay, so everyone here, I want you to give an oral narration. As I said, we should always be ready. Doesn't matter when, we should teach our students to always be ready to give an oral narration. They may not have known before you started reading a story or having a story read aloud, but they'll know at the end. You remind them to always be ready. So here we have century upon century of idealism could hardly have failed to influence reality. In the most ancient regions of Tlön, one may, not infrequently, observe the duplication of lost objects. Two persons are looking for a pencil. The first finds it. The first person finds it, but says nothing. The second finds a second pencil, no less real, but more in keeping with his expectations. These secondary objects are called Hronir, and they are, although awkwardly so, slightly longer. Until recently, Hronir were the coincidental offspring of distraction and forgetfulness. It is hard to believe that they may, I'm sorry, it is hard to believe that they have been systemically produced for only about 100 years. But that is what Volume 11 tells us. The first attempts were unsuccessful, but the modus operandi is worth recalling. The warden of one of the state prisons informed his prisoners that there were certain tombs in the ancient bed of a nearby river, and he promised that anyone who brought in an important find would be set free. For months before the excavation, the inmates were shown photographs of what they were going to discover. That first attempt proved that hope and greed can be inhibiting. After a week's work with pick and shovel, the only throne unearthed was a rusty wheel, dated sometime later than the date of the experiment. The experiment was kept secret, but was repeated afterward at four high schools. In three of them, the failure was virtually complete. In the fourth, where the principal happened to die during the early excavations, the students unearthed or produced a gold mask, an archaic sword, two or three clay amphorae, and the verdigris, a mutilated torso of a king with an inscription on the chest that has yet to be deciphered. Thus, it was discovered that no witnesses who were aware of the experimental nature of the search could be allowed near the site. So, who can give me a narration?
Okay, so I'm not yet going to give you the narration. I have a question. Yeah. So the question I want to ask is for a text that is unfamiliar. Maybe the text you've shared right now is a text that um for people in this part of the world, especially Nigeria, many people would run away from such a text because the words require attention. The words require you to really follow the train of thought, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so many people run away from things like this. Are you meant to read it first time, second time, third time, just to digest it? Like I'm just speaking for someone that is not familiar with the text, the way the language is, and everything that relates to the text. Should the person read it multiple times, or they should just make an attempt for the first time to try to narrate the passage? So, yeah.
So this was a bit of an experiment or an object lesson, I would say. I did not give my little talk at the beginning. You have no idea what this story is from. You don't know who the author is, what it's referring to. No little talk leads to great confusion. Exactly. Thank you, Daniel. You've said a lot of what I'm trying to say here. I don't actually need anyone to give a narration of this. The text is long. It's not just long, but it's dense. It doesn't make any sense. The words are unfamiliar. The ideas are unfamiliar. Um, and I chose this very difficult passage to demonstrate to us that children don't understand a good percentage of what they hear every day. They don't understand a good percentage of what they read during a narration. So if you start with a text that is long, and it may seem fairly straightforward to you, think about this text and think about when you're just starting out, how difficult it must be for the children to be able to do this. You want to run away, like you said, Daniel. You want to run away. This text is a text that people want to run away from everywhere in the world. I don't think anyone in the English speaking world would see this text unless they had already read the context and they really appreciated the author. Would they want to do anything other than run away? Um, so this was an example. I did not give a little talk. The text is too long. It's too difficult. It's You're just starting out. We're all beginner narrators, I'm assuming. None of us were educated this way, I assume. Um, so we don't want to engage with this. There are too many questions. I didn't introduce any difficult vocabulary. Whereas what is tlon and chronir and why what are they talking about? It doesn't make any sense. Um, So thank you, Daniel. So just so you know, this is a passage from um, a short story from Jorge Luis Borges, and it is hyper realistic. It's fantastical literature. It is not something that the children will be reading. It is just something that I thought would help us understand the perspective of the child starting out and being asked to give a narration. So let's do something a little bit more approachable. Um, would someone be willing to read aloud this text?
Alex, you have a very good voice. Please read this text.
Okay, I have to zoom it. The shepherd boy and the wolf. Danny, I don't know. Just put me on the spot. A shepherd boy tended his mother's sheep near a dark forest, not far from the village. Soon he found life in the pasture very dull. All he could do to amuse himself was to talk to his dog or play on his shepherd pipe. One day, as he sat watching the sheep and the quiet forest and thinking what he would do should he see a wolf. He thought of a plan to amuse himself. His master had told him to call for help should a wolf attack the flock, and the villagers would drive it away. So now, though he had not seen anything that even looked like a wolf, he ran toward the village, shouting at the top of his voice, "Wolf, wolf!" As he expected, the villagers who heard the cry dropped their work and ran in great excitement to the pasture. But when they got there, they found the boy doubled up with laughter at the trick he had played on them. A few days later, the wolf boy again shouted, "Wolf, wolf." Again, the villagers ran to help him, only to be laughed at again. Then, one evening, as the sun was setting behind the forest and the shadows were creeping out over the pasture, a wolf really did spring from the underbush and fall upon the sheep. In terror, the boy ran toward the village, shouting, "Wolf, wolf." But though the villagers heard the cry, they did not run to help him as they had before. "He cannot fool us again," they said. The wolf killed a great many of the boy's sheep and then slipped away into the forest.
Thank you, Alex.
Okay.
Can someone please narrate this text?
Can I?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. I mean, narration now, I'm learning. So I have to tell it from my own, just like tell it like I'm telling someone who is not there, right?
Hmm.
Okay. So this is a story about a boy who keeps sheep. And so he was instructed by his master Dan that anytime he's in the bush, or in the forest rather, keeping the sheep, and he caught sight of a wolf, that he should scream to the villagers for help. So I think out of childishness, he he played tricks on the villagers and they shouted wolf when there was no, wolf in sight, just for a mere excitement, you know. He did that 2 times, and in each attempt, the villagers ran out to help him. And anytime they realized that there was no wolf and that the boy was only trying to play tricks on them. Then on the day that the wolf attacked, he screamed for help, and nobody um, came to help him because they thought, oh, okay, and he has done this 2 times, and whenever we get there, we don't get to see a wolf. So at this time, they think that he was, they didn't believe that wolf really attack the guy because of the trick he has been playing on them. So he didn't get um, to see people running towards the forest to help him as they do before. And yeah, so the wolf attacked and killed many of his sheep, and then um, slipped away into the forest. I don't know. Do I have to say kind of? I think that's all right.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you for your narration, Alex. So, and Alex is a new learner with narration, just like any of us and our students if we have not employed narration previously. So he did a great job doing it. Typically, it's discouraged to even say good job on that narration, to give any sort of stamp of approval for quality or content, instead to appreciate the learner for participating and for giving their retelling of the story. So even me saying good job is more discouraged. Um, so yes, so Alex gave the story in his words. He was able to synthesize all of that information in his mind and tell it back to us. So he now knows within him the content of the story, the characters in the story, the setting, and what it means. He told us all of that. And do you feel that you understand the shepherd boy and the wolf better, Alex, than the first time when you read it?
Um, yeah, I, I think I would say I understood it both ways, as in the first time I read it and the second time. But what happened in the second time is that I tried to use my own word
Mhm.
and follow my own sequence. I didn't follow it the way that the writer typically, wrote the story. I just had to find my own way around it, and tell it the way I understood it, or the way I think the next person would also, kind of understand what I'm saying, which I did not um, do well. I mean, I didn't do it very well. Maybe next time I'm trying to narrate, I would, yeah, do better.
And that is the goal for all of us and for our students is we're always improving. And so you now have done a self-examination, which I assume would have happened if I hadn't asked for your feedback. I think you probably were thinking those things already. And the same happens with the students. They are saying, "Oh, I didn't I didn't think of the words that I wanted to use. I didn't do it in the order that was very understandable. I need to do that better next time." Um, that's something that's helping the student to gain insight into their own performance. It's helping them to hone their practice of these arts, and it's helping them to engage with self-examination, which is something that can be hard for humans to learn, but these children will learn it at a very young age. And it's not because they're getting outside criticism. We don't even say good job. We don't correct them on their narration. All of this is happening organically. within their minds and hearts, which is the magic of narration. So does anyone have any questions? That's the end of my lecture.
Yes, I have a question. You know, after this narration, after the narration, I start thinking, what is the goal of narration? Is it to tell a different story? Is it to tell the story in entirely different way? Because if I am to tell this story um, to someone who have not read the book or who does not have this book, and I want to tell it in a way because I have something in mind, that I want the person to understand. So how am I going to tell that story? Because I'm not a good storyteller anyway. So how am I going? I sit here thinking, well, how am I going to convey the story? What are the things that I need to, tell the person in order to evoke some kind of reaction or emotion in that person? So when we are doing this is my question now. So when we are narrating, what are we trying to do? Are we doing what are we trying to do? Is it we are trying to tell the story differently, or from the way the author told the story? What are we trying to do, and how do we do good narration? I came to the class very late.
So those are good questions. I did touch on that at the beginning, but I'm happy to talk about it more. I did want to mention one thing I noticed when you did your narration, you perfectly quoted at the end of yours the words at the end of the story. And some children are very bright and they will try to memorize these stories. The goal is not memorization. In fact, memorization and a child attempting to memorize inhibits their ability to attend to the text and understand and learn. So we should encourage them not to memorize and instead to try to understand what the text means. So the goal is for the learner to retell the subject, whether it is a text or a story that happened to them, or an image or a movie, in their own words, in their view of what the the main spirit of the story was, the points of the story, the style of the story. As students progress through this oral fluency, they will learn how to mimic the style of these authors that they're narrating. Um, so it is not to memorize, and it's not necessarily to use different words. You may use the same words that the text used, but you're making them your own. The point is that you're using your own powers of storytelling to tell the same story in a different way. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it does. I also wanted to say this because I've not seen narration in this way. Because some we always want to narrate. When you watch a movie or you saw something in the market, something that just happened in the streets, and you want to tell your neighbor or your friend what happened. Maybe you want to summarize the movie, and because somebody may think, how will a narration help my child? You know, what is the role, as in what is the benefit of narration? But I'm just reading it here, and I realize the benefits is, as in the benefit of narration is so big that we if we don't do narration, some of the common things that we always want to do, we will not do it well. Because like I said, when we watch a movie or we saw something that happened, we want to come back and report. And sometimes when we are doing it, you often hear people, and I do say that always, oh, I'm not a good storyteller. I'll just have to, you know, say it anyway, and I hope you understand. And at the end of that, the person keep asking questions because they didn't really get what you've said, and you yourself will be telling the person, it may not make sense until you see the video or to see the movie. But if we have been practicing this art of narration, it will be very easy for us to do it. A little bit easy for us than when we don't practice it. So I think for myself, I will practice this as much as I can. Maybe tell it myself. If I see a movie I just have to tell myself, narrate it to myself. Or if I witness an event, I come back and then narrate it. And that will also help me to pay attention to that thing because I know that I'm going to narrate it afterwards. So I think it's not a thing, I believe it's a very um, um, it plays a very critical role in our learning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alex. Very insightful questions and contribution. What I would like to say, okay, before the next person ask her question, let me just quickly make a short contribution. I have noticed that there tend to be this struggle in the classical tradition for people to know or say how mathematics is done. So I'm saying this because you made a very insightful statement when you were talking about the narration per mathematics. That mathematics, you can actually narrate mathematics, right? Because many people would just assume that when you come to the classroom, all you need to do in mathematics is just to go right ahead and tell people find X or find Y, right? But there's also narration in mathematics. And yeah, I just want to say that this is very helpful. And it will be very helpful for many teachers. Alex is shocked. And it will be very helpful for teachers to know that, yes, in mathematics, there's narration in it. All right, thank you. There's someone raised her hand up. Yeah, Mrs. Zita, please, you can ask your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. My question was regarding the answer that she was giving to Mr. Alex. She said that it's not children are smart and they could easily um what's the word now? Memorize some of those words from the passage. Does that mean that memorization is not good for children? Or I don't know. I was of the opinion that yeah, for children to memorize actually does help their brain, um, or something. Where I felt it was an advantage, but hearing it from that angle, is it that it's not something that is advisable?
I think you're correct that it is good for their brains. It is good for them to develop their art of grammar as well. I was saying that memorization does not have a significant role in narration. The posture we want the child to take as they are considering the subject of what they're going to potentially have to narrate, typically a story. We want them to listen to the story. They can pay attention to details and try to remember those details, but in trying to memorize the actual text, that will distract them from understanding the content and the meaning of the story. Typically, there may be savants that can do that, but typically, the way the human mind works, the human brain cannot process information to memorize while also understanding that information to be able to tell it back in narrative form. So, um, it's better for students instead of, especially with the short texts. Some of these Aesop's fables are very short and they can memorize it. It's better for them. They can use the same words they hear if they think they're the best words to use in their retelling, but not trying to say it exactly the same way that it was said. Instead, telling the same idea in their own way. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
Sure. Charlotte Mason talked a lot about memory work. Memory work is an essential part of classical education. Her what she said was that things that children memorize should not be rote. They should not be disembodied facts that don't have any relevant meaning to the children. They should be passages of beautiful literature, beautiful poetry, prose, in a part of a story that the child already has read or knows and understands the context for. if it is part of some of a work and not the complete work. It's better to memorize complete works if their length allows for it. So an entire poem instead of just one stanza. Um, and again, that's to facilitate the child building a relationship with the content. If they understand why those words were written the way they were written in the context, they understand it much better than just being told, you need to say this just this way, get it in your brain, spit it back out, make sure you get the words correct. Um, However, the Bible, for example, Bible verse memorization, getting information into our minds and hearts that way is very valuable. So it is an essential part of a classical education, in my view, and in Charlotte Mason's view. I was speaking of memorization being not desirable only in the context of narration. When we are going to be narrating a text, we are not wanting the child to memorize it word for word. Any
Thank you
other
so
questions?
much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your question.
All right, thank you so much, Cherries. Thank you for everyone that have made out time to attend to this program. Our goal is to have series of such programs every month. So hopefully we are going to have another one. We might have to, if Cherries is up to is planning to speak on something else, but yes, we'll be having another one next month. So it's on this note.
That would be great.
Yes. It's on this note we would call it a day. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. See you next time. Bye bye, everybody. Thank you,
Thank
Cherries.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
There is
Thank you so much. Thank you.